Most bankers aren't ready to help you until after their third cup of coffee. But with Central National Bank's after-hours service, you don't have to wait for the bank lobby to open to get help. You can contact us from 6 to 8:30 in the morning or from 5 to 10 in the evening, and we'll connect you to a real, live, local person who can answer questions and fix problems 7 days a week. Bank different. Bank Central. Central National Bank. Member FDIC.
Coming up on the Payoff, Tony Mandarich was the second pick in the 1989 NFL Draft. The 4 other guys taken in the top 5 are all in the Hall of Fame. Tony went from being the incredible bulk on the cover of Sports Illustrated to years later being the incredible bust, once again on the cover of Sports Illustrated. A lot of people thought that his epic fall was due to steroid use, but as he tells us, the fact that he was off steroids had something to do with it, but his incredible appetite for drugs had just about everything else to do with it. We're talking about shooting up drugs at halftime of an NFL football game. He talks about that. He talks about how he used to con doctors to get prescription drugs. And, of course, we cover his epic fall. But then we talk about the rise from the ashes and how his life is beyond his wildest dreams. And not just because he made it back to the NFL as a starter every day for 3+ years. Because he's sober one day at a time. I get selfish here. I had to ask him questions about how he held out his rookie year to almost fight Mike Tyson. That's a real situation that almost came to fruition. He tells that whole story. And he tells many other interesting, entertaining, but most importantly, inspiring stories. I want to get right to Tony Mandarich, but, of course, the opener, the Ricky Henderson of the Payoff, Kevin Souza.
Our next guest was an offensive lineman at Michigan State and was the number 2 NFL draft choice this year. Look at this picture. This is him on the cover of Sports Illustrated right there. Boy, ladies and gentlemen, talk about cholesterol. Please say hello to Tony Mandarich. Tony, where are you?
Pete.
Tony.
How are you, buddy?
What's up, man? How are you?
I'm doing well. It's not 115 degrees in Phoenix, so I'm happy.
This time of year, I got a buddy who actually moved. I'm from Philly, so all my friends are a lot of them are still up there. And he and his wife moved from Phoenix back to the Philadelphia area. And another one of my buddies and I were talking. He said all they do is bitch about the weather now because it's not how it is out there, this time of year.
It's a different animal.
100%.
That's why people from Philly are so tough. A la Reggie White.
Reggie White, yeah. Well, and Tony Mandarich from Canada. There's something in the water. Something about being from the north, and it's easy. It's funny. If I have to call somebody on the phone, I was thinking about this because I was thinking about what am I gonna say to them? If I have to call somebody on the phone that's not an alcoholic,
right?
It's a little different. It's a little. There's just the rhythm that I don't have. When I call an alcoholic, the first thing I'm like, well, I guess I'll tell them the truth. I need to get to a meeting.
Right.
I haven't been to a meeting since last Friday, and at that meeting, I said I need to get to more meetings.
Oh my God!
And so it's right. It's the instant connectivity, that connective tissue that we have together in sobriety.
It's even though it's a podcast, it's like having a meeting.
It is.
In a slightly different format. There's no preamble, but you're talking from one drunk to another. Yeah.
And you've got 26, 27 years?
Yeah, God willing, March 23rd will be 27.
I'm a football guy, and I'm selfish kind of with this podcast, and I'm hearing from outside sources I need to get a little less selfish because people are actually starting to listen, but this is you're right in my wheelhouse, dude. In 1989, I was 12 years old. I was obsessed with football. And, guys like yourself, guys like Brian Bosworth, Which is, could you imagine? I ended up being fucked up. You get these are you guys are my heroes.
You had two great examples.
Yeah, I really did. But there was something about football at that point in time. It was really, it's larger than life today, but it started to turn a corner with guys like you, and just made its mark in pop culture before there were 37 million ways of getting information. You know, there was ESPN, ABC, CBS.
Right.
Sports Illustrated, and you were a huge part of that. What was the ego like for you in 1989? Did you know the Sports Illustrated cover? Did you know you were going to be on the cover?
Yeah, I mean, they were, they had I want to say they spent like 10 to 14 days with me, half of them in Michigan, and then it was, I want to say a month later when I moved to LA. They came out there, and then the photographer and the writer Rick Tellender came out, and like, what was my purpose for moving to LA? Well, that's where my trainer was, and I wasn't going to hold anything back. I wanted to be kind of like, it's saturated now, but it's like back then it was like the mecca of bodybuilding and or athletes, and it's like I want to surround myself around that, because I'm a firm believer of what you surround yourself with, what your environment is, you will probably be like or are like. I don't hang around with people in a book club because I don't read that many books. I mean, I listen to a lot of books. I probably listen to a book a week, but I don't, unless it's a phenomenal book, then I'll buy it in like a hard copy.
But I know what you mean. You surround yourself with like-minded individuals, and that scene out there, I think that picture you was taken in Venice Beach, and you just look like a complete behemoth. And this is leading up to the draft. I think that cover comes out like 2 days or a week before the draft. And again, it's the time when Sports Illustrated, somebody like my dad didn't know who you were until that Sports Illustrated cover, because he was just a casual fan. And all of a sudden you become, a household name, literally. At that point in time, leading up to the draft, are you off steroids? Are you cycling on or off, or where's that at?
So my last cycle was fall of '89, and this is how I approached it. If we looked halfway through the season, if we looked like we were going to make a bowl game, I would then switch to water-based steroids, because they're out of your system a lot quicker. And then as we got even closer towards the end of the season, I would get off the water-based, because, I wasn't carrying around that much fat, and that's kind of really where it stores itself, and, for testing. And I just kind of timed it out, and it was like, okay, like my last game was the Gator Bowl against Georgia, New Year's Eve 1980. It was actually New Year's Eve 1988 going into 1989. So my last steroid cycle was probably October of that year, and knowing that they're going to test at the game, and then not just that, but knowing the combine was coming up in February, March, and the combine was a big thing, is a big thing, but it's not like it is now. Like it's like a freaking circus, televised, and it's like a whole week of combine. And back then it was, show up to Indy, where they had the combine almost all the time, and I think they still do have it there most of the time, because it's kind of centrally located in the country. And I was in a position of being a projected top 5 pick. So people like myself, people like Deion Sanders, people like Troy Aikman. 4
of the top 5 picks, by the way, in your draft are in the Hall of Fame.
Yes. I feel, and obviously I'm the one that's not, but I can tell you one thing, I feel honored to have been in that class.
Yeah, Troy Aikman, you, Barry Sanders, Derek Thomas, and then Deion.
Yep. And then, not to mention if you keep going down the list of that first round, it's like you have Steve Atwater.
Yeah.
Bert Grossman, I believe. I mean,
Bert Grossman went to my high school. I went to Archbishop Carroll outside of Philly.
Really?
So Bert Grossman was a legend,
Yeah, and he was, I think, in the top 10 pick.
Yeah.
Or top 12 pick. So I mean, there was a lot of great athletes in that first round of that draft. So
you knew you were going to be a top 5 pick.
Yeah, because scouts are talking to you, and teams are talking to you, and they're obviously not violating any NCAA rules as far as talking to you before the season's over. But once the season was over, it was like, well, I'm not in school anymore, and I'm not eligible to play college football anymore. So then there was a lot of interviews, a lot of meetings. So when I went to the combine in Indy, I did my physical. I did everything that you would do at a combine, except I didn't do the physical, like the running, the lifting, and the other stuff, because being in that position of a projected top 5 pick, you had some leverage, and you could kind of make your own calls and be like, okay, I'm going to have my pro day at my school in 6 weeks. So it basically gives me 6 more weeks to prepare.
Yeah.
Physically after getting beat up all season. I believe a few of the other guys in those top 5 guys, I believe a few of them did the same thing I did. And this is long before the quote unquote pro day was like a popular phrase.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't common. But I did it and used that leverage to my advantage to heal, my body and to prepare, for a 40 time. I worked with a track coach.
Now, do you cycle back up before you go, before your day in East Lansing, or no, you're done after October?
Last cycle's October.
Okay.
And not replaced with anything except, I'm not even sure creatine was really around then. I was taking this is a free plug for this company if they're even still around. But I was taking those Animal Pack vitamins. Like they came in a little plastic pack. There was like a few horse pills in there.
Oh yeah.
and
like the brown and the light ones.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah. So I was doing that, and I was, just doing your basic stuff, eating. My nutrition was pretty darn on point. A lot has changed over the last 30 years just because of education and, just science. So were there some, could the diet and the nutrition have been better? Yes, absolutely. But it was pretty darn good as it was. And again, it was embellished a lot on David Letterman, for clickbait, if you will.
Yeah, at that point in time. Yeah, I mean, you're sitting there with David Letterman, and
right.
Are you totally, like, were you on any drugs at that point in time? Were you on the painkillers yet?
No.
Okay.
I had taken painkillers, but it was taken for the reason they were made.
Yeah.
And I wasn't taking them daily. And, you'll know this. When you're in severe pain and you take a painkiller, you will get somewhat loopy, but for the most part, because the pain is great, it works on the pain, takes the edge off the pain, and you really don't get too euphoric. But, that's kind of how it started for me. And then I started to realize, I feel pretty good. Like my back hurts maybe a little bit. I'll take a painkiller. Well, then I started getting that euphoric high. And I was like, this is pretty good. Like, this is better than even, drinking sometimes.
Yeah, my mom hates when I mention this, but I discovered she's not an addict, and I discovered her medicine cabinet. So she had just a ton of shit left over. And I was a senior in high school, and it was like I discovered plutonium. And right. I was flying high into my second semester of senior year. And it was one of those things too. You're like, well, I'm okay on this. People can't tell that I'm messed up.
No.
And this is way before any of the education. Like, look, man, if you get wrapped up in this stuff, you're fucked. I mean, you have a way out that you and I will talk about, but you're in big trouble. But I didn't even know back then that it was bad. I just thought I'd discovered a shortcut. There wasn't the education.
Exactly. The bad people or the bad drug addicts are the cocaine users, the heroin users. It's like that it's all stereotype, right? And it never even entered my mind that you could be a drug addict with pharmaceuticals. It was because my stereotype back then, we're talking way over 30 years ago, is an alcoholic is a guy in the middle of summer in LA, hanging out in an
Skid Row.
alley. Yeah, Skid Row with a brown paper bag that has a bottle of wine in it. And, it's 90 degrees out. And it's like, that to me was like a stereotypic alcoholic. Right? That's what I would envision. Little did I know that those types of people run Fortune 500 companies.
Yeah. And I'm bouncing all around here, but you're now in that rare air, but all of a sudden you develop into your mainlining painkillers, injecting them. And at that point, are you thinking, whoa, this thing's got a hold of me? Or are you thinking, I'm Tony Mandarich, I can control it?
That was the very, very first time ever I used the word drug addict on myself, because it was introduced to me. It was a pharmaceutical, which, to me made it like a little bit more, white collar drug addict, if you will, instead of a Skid Row drug addict. And it's like, I know it's not laced with something because it came from a pharmacy. That came from, I almost said something funny. It came from a pharmaceutical which you can trust. But anyways, that being said,
but that shows how embedded that was into the normal consciousness.
Right. Exactly. So when I found out it was going to be an injectable, I was like, okay, well, I mean, I'm good with that because I've taken injectable painkillers before from doctors.
And you're jacked, so it's not hard to find a vein.
No, not at all. I mean, you have garden hoses going down your arm. So, it's like, so then this, friend of mine said, no, it's like the best way to do it is to shoot it in your vein with like a little insulin needle. And that was the first time I was like, whoa. I was like, that's what drug addicts do. And this, a good friend of mine, right? And he said, look, man, he's like, it'll be more effective. And, he's like, you don't have to do it, but he goes, like, I do it and you can trust me on it. And, I had enough trust in the guy that I knew he wasn't out like for ill will or to harm me. And at the end of the day, I'm still the one that puts the needle in my arm if nobody's making me do it.
Yeah.
So as soon as I did it, that was like my first time where I had that kind of like, that's what drug addicts do, is stick a needle in their arm. But I did it, and 5-6 seconds later, that euphoria that usually took a painkiller 10, 15, 20 minutes to hit you was just incredible. And then, went on chasing that for 3 more years.
And for me, it's like I can relate to that in a sense where, and this is why we're addicts, because it feels so good. It's like, well, okay, drug addicts do this, but now I'm high and I don't give a fuck because, right? Because I feel better than I've ever felt. And, and so then it's just, it's gone. You have lost control. And if you have that, I had addiction in my family, have it. And I just feel like I was predisposed. I felt really good the moment I had my first beer. And different than other people. Not most people don't remember that. So let's backtrack a little bit because we'll get into all the the recovery, and I want to get to the start though. You grow up in Canada, and there's a game plan for you, and it's to play football at a higher level. So you move to Ohio your senior year to play football. What was that like for you to move? You always hear that's a tough year for somebody to move. You're 16 or 17, you move your whole life to Ohio to accomplish something. That's like what a 35-year-old person does for work.
Yeah.
Was that a lot for you?
Some people never do. And some people will never do stuff like that.
Yeah, some people are scared to do it. So was that a lot for you?
Scared. It was a lot, but the desire to do what I dreamed of doing was greater than the fear of doing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So like my desire to, get a scholarship and make it to the next level and then play college football and, become a starter, become all conference with whatever school I go to, and this being Michigan State, all Big Ten, and then try to make All-American, then try to win the Outland Trophy, then try to be the first pick in the draft, and then become an All-Pro, and then get in the Hall of Fame, and then retire, and then just ride off into the sunset and be like, life is good.
And as a young man, that plan starts to pan out, which is ultimately you come to learn, I come to learn. There's an acceptance with sobriety that that's not, the blueprint. My blueprint doesn't always turn out the way it's supposed to, or I intended. But for you, it works. You moved to Ohio, at least the beginning part. You moved to Ohio. Your brother plays at Kent State, right? And so
Correct.
He becomes your legal guardian.
Correct.
And so
my parents have to sign off.
Yeah. But by the way, your parents are like basically immigrants who came over to this country. They didn't have it easy.
Oh, look, the story of my life. My life pales in comparison to what they had to go through to escape communism, to go, in the middle of the night, crossing a river that's up to your neck in water, holding a small suitcase with all your belongings, and they have gun turrets at the border with the big lights that, cross to make sure nobody's trying to escape the country.
And what country was this Yugoslavia or?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep. So they're originally from Croatia, but that was a province in Yugoslavia, but now it's a country. But, look, and you think of, like that story, and then I think of me moving to Ohio. Yeah. I'm like, it ain't that bad.
Yeah.
Right? It's like my mom, God rest her soul, she told me stories where her mom would come into class in Yugoslavia in third grade, and she would pull her out of class, and she would talk to the teacher and say, I'm taking my daughter out of class because the guy that used to work for us that would tend the sheep that we own in the mountains has quit. So I need her as a third grade girl to take this wooden staff and tend to the sheep to make sure no wolves kill the sheep. And my mom was like, yeah, okay.
Jesus.
Let's go. So that being said, and I know we're bouncing around a little bit here.
All good.
When I'm in Indy, I might come back and it's camp and it's hot and it's humid and we're in our second hitting practice.
And you're sober at this point in time.
Sober at this point. I start to feel sorry for myself. In my mind, I'm like, oh, it's hot, it's humid. Hoping I don't cramp up because I lost a lot of water weight in the morning practice. And then I think of that story, and I think to myself, I don't have any problems. I have no problems at all. I'm doing something I love to do and getting paid seven-figure salary for it.
And that's a perspective that comes with being sober.
That is the priceless perspective that you can't buy that perspective. And you have it. A lot of people have it. A lot of people that are not even in a program have it.
Yeah.
Because they've, it's just life circumstance. But it's one of the most priceless perspectives for me is playing in the NFL as a train wreck and chemically, self-induced and drinking, and then playing in the NFL stone cold sober. And that perspective is it's just unbelievable.
You got a second lease on life. You know, a lot of people don't get as lucky as you get or I get to basically live in the bonus round of life, and then to have the opportunity to play in the NFL and let it slip through your fingers, and then to get another shot at that. Clearly you worked for it, but we're talking about, that's 1 in a million.
Yeah. Again, it's 1 in a million, right? Because to be drafted second is like 1 in a million. And then to get a second chance is 1 in a million. Well, the real lottery for me was getting sober. That's the biggest winner of all for me. I mean, being second in the draft it pales in comparison to getting sober for me. It's like, because without the sobriety part, literally nothing else matters. I don't matter. The family doesn't matter. The employer doesn't matter. You don't matter. Everything is bad. Like, there's nothing good that comes out of it from my experience and from the experience that I've seen of other people.
And so your experience, I want to go back to college or you're in Ohio, and you get recruited by Michigan State. You get recruited by Nick Saban.
Yeah, some guy named Nick Saban. Yeah.
Some guy named Nick Saban who would end up coaching at Michigan State, and by the way, is at Alabama now, or end up being the head coach at Michigan State. But did he know? Your brother played at Kent. Did he recruit because I know he coached at Toledo, and I'm probably all over the map with like the timeline, but was he familiar with your brother, or did he just know that area in Ohio? Was that the area he was recruiting?
That was his area. Because George Perlis, our head coach at Michigan State, was defensive coordinator for the Steelers of the 70s that won the 4 Super Bowls. So he recruited Nick as to be the defensive back coach. And then obviously in college there's so much recruiting. Ohio happens to be
it's a hotbed.
It was a hotbed. I think it still is. Ohio, Pennsylvania. Texas and Florida at the time were huge. Now there's a few more states that are like really hotbeds, California included. But it was his area, but he also went to Kent State. So that was probably one of the reasons it was his area. Like, I'm sure if they said, do you prefer a certain, couple states or whatever? But Nick Saban was also good friends with Coach John Nemec, who was my head coach at Kent Roosevelt High School. And
so he went there. Was he there to recruit you, or was your school so good and so many good players that he was looking at other guys?
We had like 4 or 5, I don't know what you call them, 5-star recruits on our team, where they were top in the state, and whether they were defensive linemen, offensive linemen, wide receiver, whatever. So there was a lot of scouts coming from all different colleges to watch these guys during games. So the plan was, hey, hopefully they'll notice me too. And we'll keep our fingers crossed, because you got to play well, and, a lot of variables. And Coach Nemec, him and his family, they didn't have to, welcome me with open arms, and they did. Because if you think about it, if I end up going there and playing at Kent Roosevelt, I'm taking the spot of an American kid. And a lot of people would be like, well, that's not fair.
Yeah, especially at a huge football high school like that.
Yes. So, our stadium held close to 10,000 people in high school.
And some kid's worked all his life, right? That's his dream, is to start at that high school, and now Tony Mandarich comes in and takes his job.
Yes. And I'll tell you what, those people couldn't have been more gracious. They were some of the greatest people I had ever met in my life, and developed friendships, and nobody resented it, and I never even really thought about that at that age, because you're young and stuff. But nobody really pushed back, and they were all welcoming, and they all wanted me to do well, and it was almost like within a week of being there, it's like I'd been there for 4 years.
Did you feel like I hear people say that come into 12-step and sobriety. A guy said this in particular one time when I was first coming around, born on third base, thought I hit a triple. Did you appreciate that, or did you feel like a sense of entitlement because the plan is going, it's everything's going according to that blueprint that you put out with your brother?
You mean, did I feel entitlement going to Kent Roosevelt?
Yeah, I mean, just the whole deal. I mean, it seems like everything's working out for you early on. Not really.
No, I didn't. I was grateful. There was probably a 7 or 8 year period where I lived in entitlement, and that was that was close to the draft, and that was all the way up till I got sober.
You go to Michigan State. And that's big time football. You go to Michigan State, you earn a scholarship, which is one of those things, and hang in there and take this compliment just as an athlete. People are like, oh, Tony Mandarich took steroids, and that's why. It's like, dude, it's like the same thing with Barry Bonds. It's like Barry Bonds, you had to have, he was one of the best athletes, right? Before he took steroids. And that literally just puts you in a microwave as far as your physical ability is concerned. What was the leap like for you, skill and athletically, when you started to take steroids from high school into college? I did my first cycle in May of my spring semester of it was right before graduation of high school. And I did a real mild cycle. And the reason I did it was because I couldn't get over the threshold of benching 315 pounds. And now you got high school athletes benching, warming up at 315 pounds. And it's crazy. And that's a huge deal, dude. I was a football player and getting set to go play in college. And if you couldn't lift 275 within your circle of football players or egomaniacs, you're kind of like, people look down on you. It's a big fucking deal. And you go to bed at night thinking, I got to fucking find a way to get up 300 pounds or I don't count.
Yes. And your peers, as they should, hold you accountable. And my peers held me accountable, but my peers also weren't they didn't hold me accountable and said, you have to do steroids. Everybody kind of kept everybody accountable. Like, hey, look, make sure you go to class, make sure we're doing all the right things the coach wants us to do. And, when you are surrounded, or if you're lucky enough to be on a team like that at any level, I don't care if it's.
And this was in high school or college you're talking?
Actually both, but especially in college because I was there 5 years.
Yeah.
We kept each other accountable, and I kept people accountable, and people kept me accountable. And I think, translating that even from being an athlete and on the field, your true friends in life will keep you accountable, and they will call you on your shit, whether they're in the program or not.
Yeah.
Because somebody that says, hey, I see my friend here screwing up, but you know what? It's not my business. I'm staying out of it. That's not really your friend. That's just somebody that doesn't want to deal with some confrontation and drama. It's like, if I see and I don't have many friends by choice, and if I see one of my friends kind of straying, I will not embarrass them, but I will pull them aside if we're in a group or something, and just be like, hey man, FYI, this is what I see you doing. Now, I don't know if you see yourself doing it, but I'm just making you aware of it. And I'm telling you because I love you. And I don't want any harm done to you. And I'm not judging you or anything like that. I'm your friend. That is, to me, that's like a huge part of being like a legitimate true friend. And I can tell you, I have less than 5 friends, what I consider friends. I have thousands of acquaintances.
Yeah.
But I have very few friends, and because I also can't dedicate, for my definition of friendship and what I expect out of a friend, I can't dedicate that much time to more than 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 friends. It's like once it becomes more than that, then I'm spreading myself too thin.
Yeah.
If I'm expecting them to do and treat me a certain way, and I'm going to treat them that same way, I really can't juggle more than 3 or 4 like really, really close friends that will know my deepest, darkest secrets or whatever the case may be. It's like, or somebody you talk to about your mom dying, or like you have the acquaintance people, and then you have those people that are like, that sit with you.
Yeah, that's why I relate that to being sober in 12 steps in AA, because when you have a sponsor you work with for a long time, they know everything, and it's an awesome relationship. And okay, life happens. Maybe you have to get a new sponsor or whatever, but then you've got to start all over with the deepest of shit. And it's good. It can be healthy because you add another person to your circle, but at the same time, I like somebody who already knows all my layers, where I can just pick up the phone and call them, and they know the context. I mean, and that's the beautiful thing about AA. You can pick up the phone and call somebody in your circle, and you get right to it, dude, like we did today. There's no, those are my favorite kind of alcoholics. When somebody calls you up and they tells you the dirtiest, darkest thing they just thought about or they're going through, and you're like, okay, this is my wheelhouse.
And there's no shock value to them. It's like,
and when it's the beauty of the vulnerability, right? Like it feels good to be a part of that.
Right. And they know how messed up we are.
Yeah.
So it's like, I mean, it's that, I mean, there's so much strength and vulnerability, but I wouldn't have said this 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, but this vulnerability has changed into a different word of something else that I want to talk about of the society that's going on here in the U.S. and it's amazing to me how much the tools of the 12 steps have helped observe things in this country and be like, you know what, the only thing that the program promises us is if we follow these guidelines, that we won't have to drink again.
Yeah.
And the promises will come true. And then, like these last 2 years have been, rough for everybody. And unless you're a pharmaceutical. And then did I just think out loud?
Yeah.
And then it gives like those tools apply, you apply them to your life, and they're great tools for anybody to live by. You take the word alcohol out of them and just, you do the 12 steps, and it's like, this is a great outline for how to live life, even if you don't have an addiction problem.
So I got to ask you, just generally out of curiosity, where do you think like we're going? Like, do you think it's positive that people are taking advantage of this vulnerability, or do you think it's kind of we're almost going in a direction? Because the guy I played for in college, this guy Jim Reed, says he's worried about society. He's worried about that stuff you talk about, like the accountability, right? Like we're falling off a little bit.
Yeah, I think we're falling off a lot. Like one thing for sure is, and when I say we, I'm talking about in masses. We've gotten extremely soft. We've gotten extremely entitled. We've gotten extremely unaccountable, and extremely not competent.
Yeah.
Here's like an analogy I'll give you that when it comes up in conversation with people that I will use periodically, is I don't care if the person is male or female, black or white, purple or green, what their sex is, what their sexual preference is. I want the person who's the most qualified flying the airplane. So it's about competence. It's not about all these other things that people are being distracted by. And a lot of people have started to use all these distractions as excuses for their lack of competency. And, I mean, would you, like if you didn't like, even in recent history, in the last 50 years, it's like if somebody said, the pilot of this 747 is a female, it would probably be kind of like, you'd raise an eyebrow because people would be like, well, women shouldn't be flying planes and this and that. And it's like, look, I don't care who it is or what they are or what their skin color is.
Are they a good pilot? Are they qualified?
Are they a good? That's what I want. I want the best pilot. Hey, I also want the best neurosurgeon. I also want the best, whatever the job is. I don't care about their religion, their creed. All this stuff is like, I want the most qualified person that does the job. I don't want the person that's going to use, look, hey, I could sit here and cry about, hey, I was suppressed being from Canada, going to the U.S., not having a good chance to play college football or make it to the bigs or this or that. And it was like, no, it's like, and I'd still be in Canada. And it's like, at some point, something inside of me was like, you grab the bull by the horns and you make shit happen.
Well, dude, I've read about you, and look, man, this is like, forget about your politics, but you have the same slogan or call to arms that, President Obama did years ago. Like, why not me? Right, exactly. So it's, why not me? And it's kind of like, I can do it. I can work for it. You got to have skin in the game, but and that's why we can bring it back to sobriety. It's like faith without works is dead. I can walk into a room and say, oh man, like, my life or X, Y, and Z happened. I'm predisposed to alcohol. And I had a pretty good growing up, so I'm not even saying me, but somebody can. And, it's just kind of like, hey, are you going to get busy? Are you going to, bring the shovel? Cause God's going to do the rest. And for me, on days where I don't bring the shovel, I feel like shit. And I'm part of a program that's taught me that, well, that's up to you, dude. You control your attitude. You control how I feel, because I know when I do hard things, I feel good. And there's that self-esteem. And when I do easy shit, I feel not good about myself.
Right. And it's, when I come to people with problems or issues that I have, or I'm struggling with something, whether it's current, present day, or something that happened in the past, and we'll talk about it. And then that person, and including me, if somebody's talking to me, or if I'm talking to somebody, and they'll say, okay, so what are you going to do about it? And that's an action, right? It's like, okay, so you've talked about it. We've got it laid out. We see what the problem is. We see what's eating your lunch. Unhealthy to be resentment. It breeds a disease if you hang on to shit. All this stuff. So what do you think we should do about it to make it better? And then we look for solutions, and we're solution orientated and solution based. We're not of that finger pointing generation. And I was, I'm going to include myself. It's not a generation. It's just a kind of
personality
or personality. It's like, hey, I was part of that for a decade. I was the finger pointer.
Yeah.
Because it was Green Bay's fault that I was not making it. And then it was the media's fault. And then that week before I got sober, when I looked in the mirror, I was like, there's a common denominator in all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I don't, and I'm not liking what I see in the mirror.
Yeah.
And so I was like, maybe I should stop pointing the finger. Maybe I should stop making excuses. Maybe I should listen to somebody else. And that word willingness, it was like I became willing to listen to somebody else, because I was like, I wasn't convinced yet, but I had a moment of, maybe I don't have all the answers, right?
Yeah, and that's what it takes, the willingness. Like okay, let me open my mind to, because look, I gave my life, I've given my life to alcohol. Why not try giving it to God? Like my whole life, I've given it to alcohol and drugs. Shoot, I mean, I might as well try something different.
Yeah, and
because my life is a wreck.
Yeah, it's like, apparently what I'm doing is not working. I'm not on a winning streak, right? So when people, I love it when people come to the program and they're at their, their first meeting or something, and they're like, well, and they share, and they're like, and you have the court-ordered people, and then you have people that are not sure their wife wants them to go, or their husband wants them to go, or their mom and dad want them to go, and or they're just curious. They're like, maybe I have a drinking problem, and inside I kind of giggle, right? And I obviously don't express that because I don't want them to feel like they're being judged, because I'm not judging them. What I'm seeing is myself, and what I'm seeing is it necessary to wonder if you're an alcoholic if you're not an alcoholic? Right?
Absolutely.
It's like the acid test.
Yeah.
It's the acid test. I've never, and this is funny to say these days just because of what's going on in society, but I never have woken up wondering if I was a woman. Okay.
Yeah.
Why? Because I'm not. Now, saying that 3 years ago is different than saying it now, because some people are waking up and saying, well, I feel like a woman today.
Yeah.
Right. And
but for you, being an alcoholic is black and white.
Right. It's crystal clear.
Yeah.
It's crystal, and that's not, and me using that example, I'm not talking bad about those people. I'm just giving an example. It's like what people, feel like somebody, like even my parents were like, are you sure? Like, this is after years of sobriety. They're like, are you sure you can't have one drink? And I'm like, trust me, I'm positive.
Yeah.
And they're just trying to be loving parents.
But that response, dude, is a response of somebody who's working a program, because if I'm like teetering, or maybe I'm in early sobriety, I'm just looking for an excuse. I'm looking for somebody to say, maybe you're not. Try one, and that's what we talk about, the work and being sober. Not only does it lead to a fulfilling life, but it also keeps you further away from relapse, and you didn't relapse, right? You got sober your first time, and then you stuck with it.
I've never found it necessary to go back out.
All right, so hold on. So you end up, you're in college, and you're at Michigan State. You start to take steroids. You start to literally, like a rocket ship, take off like as an offensive lineman. After a certain point in time, you didn't start off all 4 years, did you?
My first year was a red shirt. Then I started the last 4 years.
So you started the last 4 years, and you're playing. As a kid growing up watching ABC, it seemed like Michigan State really first came on my radar because, Magic Johnson, a little before my time, but of course I knew about Magic Johnson.
And there was a lot of great ones. Joe DeLamalure played there.
Judd Heathcote, right? We're talking basketball now.
Judd Heathcote was there when I was there, and his assistant was some guy named Tom Izzo.
It's still there. It's amazing. And that speaks to Michigan State. Even though Saban left to go to LSU, man, that's an incredibly rich basketball, football history. And you're part of that. But Michigan State comes on my radar playing Notre Dame, football-wise, and that's how I get to know you. I think, was Percy Snow on your team?
Yep, Percy Snow, Lorenzo White.
Percy Snow, whose brother Eric Snow played for the Sixers.
Andre Rison.
Andre Rison, was he on your team too?
Yeah, we came in together.
What the hell was he like?
Andre's a great guy. You cut all the bullshit and the media, and then even if you get Andre one-on-one, he's a great guy. I know he said some stuff about a year and a half ago about some stuff that had to do with Michigan State. And
what did he say? Do you feel comfortable saying it? I can look it up.
Well, it was a fact. It happened. I saw it happen.
He was abused, right, racially.
Well, when he got slapped in the head.
That's right.
By one of our coaches at Iowa at halftime, or it was either halftime or before kickoff when we come back to the locker room. And it was like, I know that coach. I know Andre. I know how our team was. And, look, I got hit by that coach a lot. During like practices and it wasn't like being hit because I'm going to hit you to hit you, or I'm going to grab your face mask and pull you across the line of scrimmage and say, hey, 30 minutes ago when we were in watching film, didn't I say if this guy doesn't come on a blitz, this other linebacker might come on a dog? Didn't we cover that? Because I missed it in practice. And I'm like, yes, sir. And he's like, so why, expletive. Did you miss it here? And it's like, hey, I fucked up. And it's not going to happen again. So, listen, I'm not going to go to the media and say, hey, man, I feel like I was abused by my coach because he pulled me across the line of scrimmage at practice, embarrassed me in front of all my peers, and to try to coach me. I'm like, kind of like, hey, don't do it again. And that coach, I tell you what, he taught me life lessons that I've carried my whole life.
Yeah, there's a guy who coached us. I went to the University of Richmond, and I went to play, and I couldn't play because I had cardiomyopathy, but they kept me on scholarship, and I was lucky enough to be just a part of the nest. And And we had guys did. There's a guy who coached for me, or who coached us, not for me. Nobody's ever coached for me, but who coached us, who is the defensive coordinator now at the Jags, and the guy was an absolute maniac. And the stuff he did in our locker room as kids, I mean, it was like, you get put in jail, but it actually helped us. It made us better men, and not one person on the team that I know of has come forward and said, "Oh man, this was a terrible experience." Right. It made us, it helped us develop accountability, and even talking to you now about him, I kind of sit up straight. So we could talk about this all day, but I want to get back to you at Michigan State because I only have you for so long. You're at Michigan State. You start for all 4 years. You play with Bad Moon Rising and all those other guys. And what it sounds like is Andre's still family, regardless.
Absolutely. I mean, I would, I haven't talked to him in a few, like 4 or 5 years, but I don't hold anything against him. I mean, he's one of my brothers as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and that's what's so cool about sports in college and the race stuff and the melting pot and it's brothers.
It comes down to confidence.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Who's going to start? Who's going to start at quarterback? Who's going to start at left guard? The one who's the best quarterback on our team and the one who's the best left guard.
Yeah, you don't see it. You don't see it in sports.
Right. They're not going to base it on if you got a 3.0 on your math test.
Yeah, because somebody will get killed.
Right. Right. You've done your geometry well, but you didn't make the block.
So you're at Michigan State, and you're taking off. Your profile now starts to take off like a rocket ship. Every time we look at Tony Mandarich highlights, they got you running a guy off the screen or a pancake block. As an offensive lineman, you were the first person that I'd ever really knew outside of some of the hogs with the Redskins.
Yep. Jacoby.
Joe. Yep. Yeah. Like Reggie, Joe Jacoby. Who I'm missing. Jim Lachey. So those guys. Yeah. So those guys with the Redskins were made famous, and you were another one of the offensive linemen that I'd heard of and seen, and you're extremely high profile. How was it navigate? What was it drinking like in college?
You'll find this amusing. My drinking in college, I partied and I got wasted and stuff. But not very often because I was putting enough stress on my liver, kidneys, my organs from taking steroids that I thought to myself, well, I don't want to add even more stress, physical stress on my organs and my body by coupling it with drinking. Right. So my goal of making it to the next level was more important to me than partying. Now, that didn't mean I didn't go out. And there'd be a lot of times I'd go out and have a beer or a drink. And that was not a big deal. But to go out and party all the time, I didn't do it nearly as much as, I didn't do it nearly as much as people might think I did.
Was it smart for you to go when you go to when you get done? You guys played in the Rose Bowl too, right?
Yeah.
So
we beat
USC.
USC. Yeah, we beat USC twice that year. We actually opened up with USC at a non-conference game at home that year, and then we ended up seeing them in the Rose Bowl that year.
Do you think that playing on such a big stage lended itself to you being taken so highly in the draft? I mean, you were on TVs every weekend, or do you think it was the fact that, hey, they were going to find you regardless?
Well, I mean, I think they're going to find you regardless.
Okay.
I mean, it's like, look at Randy Moss. I think he played at Marshall. Where did Jerry Rice play? I can't
Mississippi
remember.
Valley State.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, where's that?
Yeah.
Besides Mississippi, right? So it's like, if you're good, they're gonna find you.
Yeah. So were you ready?
And they may do some extra testing on drills and stuff to make sure, because they're going to take into consideration the competition you play against. Is it the same competition week in and week out that Alabama plays, that Georgia plays, that the SEC plays? Like, they're like playing a freaking bowl game every weekend. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like,
no, the Big Ten.
SEC,
I mean, you're playing in the Big Ten. It's no joke.
Yeah. So the same, and it was the same for Big Ten. It's like, you play Michigan, you play Ohio State, you play Wisconsin, So I think if you're good enough, you will be found even in the Division III school.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Just for young people coming up,
absolutely,
you bust your ass. You're a late bloomer.
You will make it.
Yeah, they will find you. So you get found. I mean, early in your tenure at Michigan State, and all these accolades. You're this decorated offensive lineman, and you move into the draft. And like I said, you become sort of a household name. But the ego, from the outside, it looks like the ego's out of control. Tony, you didn't. I remember this as a kid. You held out. Going into your rookie year as an offensive lineman, and because you were talking about fighting Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
That's true, right?
Well, it's a real story.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like a thing that really happened. Like,
so how did that develop?
I mean, I'm living in LA working out with my trainer, and I already have an agent at the time.
Who was your agent, by the way?
It was a guy named Vern Sharbaugh, and he was actually one of my brother's coaches at Kent State. Then, like, my brother at Kent State in 5 years had 4 head coaches.
Oh, wow.
So, Vern was on the staff of early of my brother's career at Kent State. And then Vern didn't go back into coaching. He became an agent, but he was somebody that always was a great guy and somebody that obviously I trusted and my brother trusted. So, and he went into that business of becoming an agent and helping players, invest their money and so on and so on. So he became my agent. So he calls me one day and he says, hey, he goes, I got a call, and he goes, I kind of had to double check some things because, this is long before internet. So he's like, we've got an offer to see if you'd be willing to fight Mike Tyson for like an exhibition fight.
Was Don King involved?
Yes. And I said, Vern, I said, are you pulling my leg? Like, are you kidding me? It's like Mike Tyson's a holy terror, right? I don't care if I'm 6'6" and 310 and strong as an ox and all this. I'm going into an arena that's not my arena. It would be the same as saying, hey, Mike, put on some shoulder pads and a helmet. Let's do a 4th and 1 drive block, right? So it's like he would get crushed on that. I'm stepping into his arena. The chances of me, surviving is a good word probably. It's probably not all that great, right? But it's like, hey, if there's a good negotiation and if the money's right, I'll take the risk. And so it was a legitimate promoter, Shelley Finkel out of New Jersey, and a legitimate, like even more legitimate and well-known manager, Lou Duva.
Sure.
Who did Oscar De La Hoya, Evander Holyfield.
Shelley Finkel basically became Tyson's manager down the road.
Yeah, down the road, right.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
So they fly out to LA and they want, first, I told them, yeah, I'd be willing. And then they said, okay, our next step is we need to find out if you have any boxing skills. So we're going to fly out to LA. We're going to get into a boxing gym and we're going to, put you through some drills. And it's like, they're like, do you have any boxing skills? And I'm like, well, I mean, street fighting is not boxing skills. And they're like, correct. And I said, so then, no, I don't have any boxing skills. Right? Should I lead with the chin? So they fly out and they put me through, it was like a 4-hour workout. And you know what? Lou Duva was like, there's no doubt that I can teach you what you need to know. You have the strength, you have the speed, you have the quickness, you have the power. And he's like, we need 9 months of solid, concentrated boxing training and conditioning. And I said, hey, I'll do it if we can negotiate it with their, Tyson's people. I'm willing to do it and put football off for a year. And I was in negotiations with the Packers and I kind of use it as a leverage.
Sure.
Tool. So, they were at the $5 million mark. Okay. And my ego probably saved my butt here. I was like, explain to them what I just said, explain to you. I said, look, I'm going into Mike Tyson's arena where he is just destroying people. And for $5 million, I'm risking my life. So I said, I wanted, 10 million.
Yeah.
This is obviously my ego even wants more, but I'm also like, hey, if I do get, permanently somehow injured, it's probably not going to happen. I mean, if I get knocked out, I get knocked out. It doesn't mean you're permanently injured, but I mean, that guy, I still believe to this day could probably permanently injure somebody.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
He was one of my favorite fighters.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and then it was like we went back and forth, and then I think what happened was Green Bay started to see that it wasn't just talk, that it was legitimate. Like this could potentially happen. Then all of a sudden, they became more willing to come up to our numbers for football negotiation. And I wanted to be the first 7-figure a year lineman in the NFL, offensive lineman. And I wish, I wish I could say I did this for the other offensive linemen, like that was my motivation, but it wasn't. Greed was my motivation. But I was the first offensive lineman to make over $1 million a year in the NFL. The next year, I believe there were 27.
Oh.
So it broke kind of like it was the critical mass that hit. And then everybody did have a legitimate, like, beef with it. Like, not with me so much, but with the owners or general managers who they would negotiate with. And they'd be like, look, this guy got paid 7 figures without stepping foot on the field. And here I am, like, putting myself in somebody else's
Anthony
shoes.
Munoz or whoever. It's
one of the greatest ever.
Yeah,
one of the greatest ever. Anthony Munoz or Jackie Slater, and the list goes on. And it's like, who've already got 3, 4, 5, 6 Pro Bowls under their belt, and they're getting paid $300,000 a year.
So how does it work out for you when you walk into the locker room, when you finally do end up? Did we wrap up the Tyson story, by the way? So they
nothing.
Did you ever have any communication with Iron Mike?
I did later in later years,
okay.
And then I did just recently a year ago. But
where'd you see him a year ago, or talk to him a year ago?
I talked to him a year ago. I was going to go on his podcast, and it was all scheduled. And then he had an offer that probably paid some good money to do an appearance in Europe.
Okay, yeah.
So it was like one of those, let's reschedule, and then we never got to reschedule.
He's one of those guys. I like you. I listened to his book recently, and it's amazing, where the money he can drum up just for showing up somewhere.
A lot of people think Mike Tyson is not smart. Mike Tyson's a very bright guy. The way sometimes he presents himself and he gets emotionally, he'll go off the handle or whatever. It's like, that's all people want to focus on. But if you look at his life, and if you look at he's made some bad decisions. He's made some great decisions. You can't be dumb and be in the position that he's in. He has made some very wise decisions, more of them in the latter part of his life.
Yeah, and he keeps reinventing himself in one way or another.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said for that.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because those skills that he had right in the ring have probably deteriorated. Now you could still, pummel somebody like you said, but he
I don't want to fight him.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing. So you get to Green Bay. Are people like September is when you start? You miss all training camp. What is that like for you to integrate yourself into the locker room? And where is the addiction or the alcoholism at that point? Are you totally you're free of alcohol and drugs when you start off as a rookie, or is it starting to ramp up?
No, starting to ramp up. And it's probably 2 months before I signed, it started to ramp up.
So when you're out in LA and you're training, getting ready for the season, you start to are you just taking orally these drugs, or are you mainlining them?
No, mainlining already. And mainlined the first 2 years in Green Bay. And then I was like, I then knew the solution, that the problem is the mainlining. It's not the other 60, 70, 80 painkillers I've taken that are oral.
Yeah.
So I straighten myself out and I get off the injectables, and now I'm getting my life together. And you know how that goes.
Yeah.
That lasted for about 6 hours, and then I was, just kept taking more oral.
How were you as performing? And were you fucked up at practice or before games?
There was no performing. I mean, we can call it what we want, but look, I'm going to call myself out. There was no performing. It was like, and I'm not saying that's an excuse. I take full responsibility, full accountability for my nonsense. But I was deep in my disease, and the most important thing to me, I mean, look, you're going to one of the greatest places in the country of tradition and football and history, and there I am, a smug ass, complaining about, well, there's no marketing opportunities there. I want this, I want that, and that's, touching on what I said earlier. That's when I had that privileged, entitlement kind of thing, and it's like, didn't work then, and it's not working for people now.
And you're not on steroids anymore. And
no,
and so there's
never went back.
Yeah, there's double-edged sword here. Now you probably stopped because the testing in the NFL was just so rigorous, right? It was so much different than the NFL. But so now you're missing that physical component, but also for me, I just take speed even as a person and as when I played. Mm-hmm. And there was a mental component to that. I felt like I was better when I was on these drugs. So now you're just completely naked as you kind of roll into the NFL. Still a good athlete, right? You're still big and strong, but
are 10-15% weaker. So if I mentioned 600 and you're 15-20% weaker, you're still pretty strong.
Yeah.
And so, but you're right. In my opinion, and this is only my opinion and my personal experience and the people that I've seen, I feel that, and steroids work. Like, they work fantastic. And you do take a risk, but they are way more psychologically a problem than they are physically.
How so? Like as far as like they're so positive for you to get off them, there's such a decline.
You just explained it. You said I felt like I had the edge on people. Like, psychologically, I felt that I could do things that, and it's like you had mentioned, like speed. It's like like you just know, like I can do something, and you're more confident in yourself. And even if you're scared, you can get over that fear because you know that you've got an edge to you and that you're taking something. So when that stops, and for me, when I stopped the steroid use because the testing was more rigorous than college football was, I almost instantly went to painkillers and alcohol. And when I say alcohol, I mean drinking alcoholically. I almost went to that like in a 4 to 8 week period. It transitioned like to fill the void. Instead of filling the void with spirit, I filled it with spirits.
Yeah.
like demons.
Yeah.
And the spirits of alcohol. But it's you and I now looking back, it's like it makes total sense. It's like that's what we do when we're in the midst of our disease. It's like the void has to be filled. Like the void was created because the steroids were removed. Well, what's it going to be filled up with now? Well, I chose, painkillers and alcohol.
I don't even know at that juncture in your life you choose. Now we know. But
right. No, I agree. But looking back, looking back, you're like, oh, I can see where I replaced that with food, or I replaced it with sex, or I replaced it with shopping, or I replaced it with gambling, it was always like, hey, stop replacing and just stop for it.
Well, something outside of myself. I was talking to another alcoholic today. Right. It's like I constantly am searching outside of myself to make myself feel better. And that's not just that's you're chasing your tail. So, and I'm curious about this. So you're using a shitload and you're drinking a lot, using a lot of the painkillers. Are you taking painkillers or drinking before practice or before games? Like, are you ever taking painkillers in the locker room or drinking in the locker room?
Only every practice. And only every game.
So you're drinking before games or eating painkillers before games?
It's more painkillers before the games. After the games, it's more drinking.
Okay.
I remember being in at a Sun Devil Stadium at ASU. That's when the Phoenix Cardinals, that was their home stadium.
They just moved from St. Louis.
Yeah, and so that really dating myself. So this is like 1990, 1991 maybe. And at halftime in the locker room, I go into a stall and I'm sticking a needle in my arm, and I'm like a starter. And and then I'm like, because I know that this painkiller is gonna make me looser, which is gonna make me play better.
Did it?
Oh my God, are you kidding me?
So were you getting was it the opposite of the guy we saw running people off film when you're watching film on Mondays or whenever you guys did in Green Bay? Are you like, fuck, man, I look terrible?
Well, I played, there were moments of glimpses of, playing well, but the majority of it was, I was, like when I played in college, I played to break people's will, and I played to, and I often use the word torture, but I wanted to break their will so they didn't want to play against me. When I got to Green Bay, it was almost like the opposite, and I became much more passive, and that's a big thing with opiates. I mean, they're downers. Opiate is a downer.
But they'll make an addict like me or you. They'll make us think we're charged up, kind of.
Exactly. And so I could tell, like in my play, that I was like, yeah, I could still hit people pretty good, but I was so disinterested because my quote unquote, it seemed like my full-time job was how to get more doctors, to get more prescriptions, to get more painkillers.
And I don't want to spend all day on this, but it's so interesting because I've heard this about you. I heard you say this. You had a way to figure out the best way to get prescriptions because I guess there were like different classes, right? And so,
yes.
So break that down real quick.
So there's a thing called a PDR. It's Physician's Desk Reference. It's almost like it's this huge, ginormous book, and they probably don't even have them in doctors' offices anymore because of the internet.
But I remember them.
If you remember them, like they were just like they had every single drug that any pharmaceutical made and what it did and this and that. So if
that's how I knew. That's how I knew what I was taking when I stole something from somebody.
Right. The prescription pad.
Yeah.
And it's like there's that whole section on narcotics, right? So then it says whether they're triplicate prescriptions, because this was before electronics. Before there was triplicates or duplicates. Well, triplicates were stronger because a copy stayed in the doctor's office, a copy stayed with the pharmacy, and a copy of that triplicate went to the DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency.
Yeah.
Duplicates are still will mind alter, and they'll still give you that high, not as much as a triplicate would, but a duplicate prescription goes to the doctor's office and the pharmacy, and that's it. So it was trying to find that sweet spot of which are the best duplicates to take to raise the least amount of red flags for getting, my drugs.
What was the best duplicate you found?
The best duplicate I found was the injectable, and it was called Stadol, Stadol. And the main purpose of Stadol, in Canada, it's called Nubain, Nubian or something like that, Nubain. It's the same drug, just different name. It's given to women that are going into labor. So it takes the edge off of their pain, but it still lets them be able to push when they need to push. But it doesn't numb you so much that,
you can still do something. It's not like you're on heroin or your phone. Right. So how are you getting this? What based on what? Are you based on that you're Tony Mandarich and you can sweet talk a doctor, or did you have back pain or?
Well, let's just call it black and white. I was just conning people.
Yeah.
I was conning doctors, and I was when I think of this, it really makes me go, damn. I had the balls to walk into certain pharmacies, kind of slowly build a relationship with the pharmacist, getting legitimate prescriptions, and then being like, hey, for $500 cash, do you think I could get some of this? And, and then all of a sudden they're like, they kind of look around and they're like, yeah, come back in 20 minutes. And it's like that first time you do it, you're like, God, I hope when I come back, the feds ain't waiting for me.
Yeah.
And you're hoping that the guy will take the $500 cash or whatever the amount of money was or whatever, or whether they were Green Bay Packers tickets or whatever. And never once did anybody decline.
Oh, it's kind of like, and that's
a red flag. Like today I look at that and I'm like, that's a huge red flag. And there are, and that's not a blanket statement for all pharmacists. That's just was my experience, because there were pharmacists I didn't approach with that because
I could just
tell.
Yeah, we can tell.
Yeah, and I'm like, I want nothing to do with that by the book guy. I'll be in handcuffs in 20 minutes.
So what's the low point? You don't, you never had any major run-ins with the law, but what's the low point in the NFL as we're kind of moving towards sobriety?
It was almost like a low point decade, but like the catalyst low point, it wasn't even the catalyst because I didn't change for 3 more years, but it was a pretty big blow to my ego when that second SI cover came out saying The Incredible Bust.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking to myself, even back then, I thought, man, I had the world in the palm of my hand.
Because the first one, for people that don't know, said The Incredible Bulk.
Yeah.
And this one
was, that was coined by SI. I didn't say that, they did. But I ran with it. I'm like, I'll run with it. And they were, like you had mentioned earlier, publications back then were few and far between, and they were a huge authority in the sports world. Like if if they did stories in SI about an Olympian or an athlete, it's like that was like not gospel, but it's like this is a credible source
Yep.
of news, of sports news. So, and they put the Incredible Bust on, and it's like
They did a fictitious story about a pitcher for the Mets, Sid Finch. Person didn't exist, but they wrote an April Fool's Day story about it. And people thought this pitcher could throw 180 miles or whatever.
oh my God.
Yeah, so that's just to give a window into Sports Illustrated. That was back in like 1987. But yeah, so the Incredible Bust, it says on the cover now. And do you just kind of drink and take drugs through that? Because you're still in the league, right?
Yeah, that's my last year in the league. It was 92. It was like I had like 2 months. It was like October, November, whatever it was. And I was ending, like when I was coming to the end of my 4-year contract, I was put on injured reserve because of a pretty bad concussion that year. And that came out, and yeah, that was like a huge like ego blow, but it was true. It's like I probably at that time I know I didn't admit that it was true. I was like, it's Green Bay's fault, it's media's fault. It was everybody's fault but mine. But once I got sober and looked back, I'm like, well, they nailed it. They're absolutely right with what they wrote. But that wasn't the catalyst that got me sober. It was along the road, because after like 2 months later or 3 months later in February, Ron Wolf, the GM, calls me up and he's like, I'm in Michigan at this time, living in Michigan. And he says, we're, just calling you, to say, thanks for your services, and we're not going to, re-sign you or even negotiate to re-sign you. So, you're declared a free agent and you can, shop yourself wherever. And, and I remember the phone call like it was yesterday. I was polite and I was like, thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity. And then, when I closed the phone, I thought to myself, yeah, screw those people. They screwed me over, and all this and all that. And it's like, that tells you the ugliness of the disease, right?
Because you believe
it.
Yeah,
because you believe it. And then, so 3 more years. And actually then a month after that, my brother died at 31 from skin cancer, and he had already been diagnosed, and it got worse, and he had died. And so then I had that happen. And then within a year of my brother's death, my parents get divorced after 40 years of marriage. And like, that's a huge blow. So,
and you're not feeling any of this.
As each thing's happening, I double down and keep taking more.
Yeah, like I'll tell you, in sobriety, and I got to, because this is like just one alcoholic talking to another. My brother who's sober has skin cancer, and I talked to him today about it. Now he's bouncing back, and it seems like it's somewhat treatable now. You'd have to talk to him or a doctor to get the full story. But I was telling him, man, I'm stressed and I'm anxious about it. 10 years ago, 11 years ago, I would just be getting hammered through the whole thing, and I don't even know. Maybe I'd have moments of breaking down, right, where it was like emotions that were just gushing. And, now it's hard and it's real, and we're kind of all walking through it together. But it sounds like, the opposite of what you're talking about.
The thing is, you're there.
Exactly.
You're there and you're clear-eyed. And that is part of a person's character.
Yeah, when my grandmother died, I was high on drugs at an off-track betting place in Philadelphia, So all this stuff's happening. You're self-medicating, and then you end up in a rehab in Detroit. What happens and what starts to change?
Well, my buddy talks to me up in Michigan where I'm living, and he says he's 10 years older than me, and he's like, if you don't, if you don't change what you're doing, it's like, I thought I was hiding it well. Obviously I wasn't. And he's like, you're going to die. He's like, and I had heard that many times. There was a lot of people in Green Bay that tried to help me. And I was like, no, I'm not as bad as you think. And, but my buddy talks to me and somebody that I respect a lot. So I was like, the one thing he said to me that was like a Louisville slugger across my face was, he's like, you've been out of the league 3 years now. And we weren't even talking about like going back to play football. We were just talking about getting my life in order. And I said, what do you mean I've been out of the league 3 years? Because it felt like I was out of the league 6 months.
Yeah.
And so I was out of the league for 3 years, and I literally got up off the couch, walked over to the calendar on the wall, and looked at the date and the year, and I was like, "Oh my God, it has been 3 years." And so, and just had good conversation, just kind of heart to heart conversation, and I said, "You know what?" I said, "What do I have to lose? I'm miserable now, and what do I have to lose?" So yeah, and he did a lot of the footwork, like of arranging, a place for me, and I paid for it. I didn't have any insurance, so I just used,
How were the finances there at the end of that?
They were getting slim.
Okay.
They were getting slim because, with the behavior of alcoholism comes grandiosity and all that other stuff, and grandiosity can be expensive. So, you had to have the best car, you had to have this, you had to have, you couldn't have one little, one ATV, you had to have four, all this. So, and then always, picking up the tab at restaurants for you and your friends. And you start doing that for years, this stuff adds up.
But now you're the guy that had 4 ATVs and you're sitting in a rehab in Detroit, right?
Yes. And
where the playing field is equal, has been leveled,
Right,
yeah.
Right. And here's one of the funny things that happens is where it's like day 6, I'm in rehab, and I'm in my first 10-person session with a counselor. So it's like a small group session. Now these other inpatients were alcohol, some kind of a chemical related addiction, and we're all sitting there and we're talking. The lady goes, and I have to give her credit because this lady was never a drug addict or an alcoholic or any kind of an addict. She was educated, and she knew, as far as she learned about the disease, about mental illness and everything. So right away, to me, she kind of for me personally, didn't have as much credibility because she wasn't in the trenches.
Yeah.
But after what she said, I gave her a lot more credibility because she had directed it towards the group. And she's like, before we start this, 1-hour discussion, I just all want you to think about this. She's like, each and every one of you, your best plans in life got you into this treatment center room in Detroit, Michigan. And it was like a baseball bat in the head. And because I was like, oh my God, she's right. Because all the dreams I had of building my empire and building my brand and doing this and becoming all pro was all consumed by drug addiction.
Do you remember what you saw, what you felt? I mean, I bet you remember that exact moment.
Oh, it was like you've seen the movie Matrix, right?
Yeah.
When everything goes slow-mo when they're fighting, and it's like everything it's like going at 1/10 of the speed. It's like the world stopped, and it's like, oh my God, she's right. And then it's like your life's almost flashing in your mind about what the hell have I done to myself and to the people around me. And that was like day 6, and she was right. She nailed it on the head. I mean, my best thinking got me into a treatment center. So that made me even more willing to listen to their suggestions. And at day 11, I started laughing again. And I thought that was not going to happen again. And the kind of laughing, it was the kind of laughing where my stomach hurt from laughing. And I forgot that feeling. So once that happened, and I was only in treatment 17 days because I was running out of money. Once that happened at day 11, there was no big flashing light or nothing of, God or whatever, but it was like one of those, I don't know what's happening here, but whatever it is, I'm digging my nails into it because I actually forgot that feeling of my stomach hurting from laughing so hard. And really, but been laughing for 27 years almost now, and almost on a daily basis with something, and that and there's been a lot of tragedy. There's been deaths of my mom. There's been divorce. There's been all these. I mean, life still continues. It ends up being on how do I handle what is happening in my life now, and but it's a much easier, softer, gentler way to live sober. And it's kind of like you're giving yourself a chance to be the best version of human being that you can be. It's life, but life still happens, and you still make mistakes. Just because you get sober, you don't become a saint. You still have to change, and it's kind of like that horse thief. You get a drunk horse thief that steals horses, and you sober him up. What do you have? Now you have a sober horse thief. He still steals horses. He probably does it even better that he's sober.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
We're the problem. A lot of times I like to
right.
think that I'm okay, and it's when I rationalize, like, I'm not doing that stuff anymore. I'm not drinking. I'm not using. So
yeah,
but
so the behaviors have to change.
Yes.
So it's like me saying, hey, you know what? I don't murder people, so I'm doing good.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And we'll believe any of our bullshit.
Right.
So hold on. So I got a couple more things before I let you go, because I want to talk about your comeback into the NFL. You get back to the NFL. I mean, now this is the unthinkable, right? Because not only are you stripped down from what everybody thought was your superpower, which is steroids, but also. It's just a friggin' blow. It's a kick in the nuts. What happened to you?
Yeah.
And so you find, I gotta believe, man. And at the time I didn't know, and you sort of did it quietly, but you build yourself back into, and first, obviously, as you've conveyed, you build yourself into an esteemable person. But now you're a good football player again, and you're not going to. It's not like you got in shape, dude. I mean, you ended up starting again for 3 years or 4 years in the NFL for the Colts. How did you get back there?
No pun intended. One day at a time. I knew what I had to do. I mean, you've been around football your whole life. You know what you need to do, except things that were not going to be part of the equation were steroids, and obviously alcohol doesn't help you become a better football player. And steroids, I do believe, I'm not sure they make you become a better football player. I believe they enhance some of your athletic ability. But you still, like you talked about earlier with Bond, you still have to have the core part of that athlete. Otherwise, every guy we know would have a six-pack and big arms if steroids work that way, right?
Yeah, you have to get in the gym.
No, you have to put the work in.
Yeah,
you have to put the work in. So the counselor, when I was leaving treatment, my counselor she said, now I know about, you played pro football, you played college football, athletics is in your history. And she was very crystal clear. She said, it's not going to hurt you to get back into the physical fitness. And she's like, and just in moderation, you don't have to, train like you used to because you were training to play for a pro sport. She's like, and she made it crystal clear, that is not going to keep you sober. What's going to keep you sober is going to meetings, getting a sponsor, getting into the book, doing the 12 steps, doing all these things, right? She was awesome. And you know what? I couldn't tell you her name.
Yeah.
But
there's a lot of people like that come across, right? In sobriety. I mean, they're just like almost angels. And they come in and
definitely was. So, but what I heard her say was, look, sobriety's first. Do these things. These are the most important things before you worry about anything. And I did. The other thing I heard was lift like a maniac. So I swear on my brother's grave and my mom's grave, every single day I left nothing on the plate when it came to the task at hand, whatever it was. There was a 6-month period where for 7 days a week, for 6 solid months, I played racquetball to try to get some foot speed back. So you're talking about, an average of 180 days in a row playing racquetball.
Yeah.
To try to get some foot speed back, because I knew I was out of the league for, 3 years. And even though I was still young, 28, 29 years old, now you're not that young as far as a pro athlete.
And what's the meeting situation like when you're crushing it playing racquetball and getting back into that shape that you need that footwork, you need quick feet.
My 12-step meeting?
Yeah.
I averaged more than one meeting a week for the first 5 years of my sobriety.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sorry. I averaged more than one meeting a day.
Okay.
For the first 5 years of my sobriety.
That's unbelievable.
There were some days that, like travel days with the team and stuff where we just couldn't make it to a meeting. So, but there were many Saturdays where a bunch of us would get together in Indianapolis that were like my sponsor and other, program guys that we would hang out with. And we would just kind of make it like a marathon day. And we would go to like a 6 a.m. meeting and then go to breakfast. Then we'd go to like a noon meeting and then we'd go do whatever we need to do for errands. Then we'd go to a speaker meeting at night. So we did 3 meetings in a day. And it's not like we felt like we were going to drink. It's like we wanted to go.
Yeah. Oh, that's you go. I heard a guy say, when he was a younger or first coming around, and he asked his sponsor, "How long do I need to go to meetings?" And the sponsor said, "Till you want to," and you want to eventually.
Yes.
So go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'm super curious if there was a guy who you played with or a coach that coached you when you were, in that entitlement bubble, when you were Tony Mandarich on drugs, and then a guy who came back across you on a day-to-day basis when you were with the Colts in recovery. Or were they like, is this a different human being? Was there a person that ever brought that up to you?
Yeah, there were multiple people. I'd say less than 10, but the most interesting one was our head coach, Lindy Infante.
Yeah.
Because he was my head coach in Green Bay. And for the first 3 years, then Holmgren came in, and then I was there 1 year with Holmgren, got released. And then Lindy Infante was the offensive coordinator in Indianapolis under Ted Marchibroda. And when I signed in February with the Colts, about a month later, Ted Marchibroda retired, and the Mr. Irsay, the owner, had named Lindy Infante the head coach. So when Lindy saw me for the workouts, when I went down there to work out for Indy, he looked at me and kind of laughed, like smiled at me and laughed. He goes, where was this guy in Green Bay? Right?
Yeah.
Because
not just this player, this guy, right? Yeah.
Right. He's like, where was this guy? And I told him and the GM, which was Bill Tobin, and
sure. How were you about opening up with people about being sober?
I told them, I said, and there was like 10, 15 of the people in the room, the scouts, the coaches, Ron Blackledge, the O-line coach at the time, who was my brother's head coach at Kent State, ironically. And I just said, look, I said, ask me anything you want, and then if you don't ask me this one thing, I will bring it up. And they asked me a bunch of questions about just normal questions they would ask any athlete. And they were like, so what do you want to share? And I said, well, I want you to hear it from the horse's mouth. I said, I had a really bad drug problem and alcohol problem. I said, a lot of people thought it was the steroids, and the steroids probably definitely contributed along the way. But I said, the core problem in Green Bay was my alcohol and like painkiller use. And then 3 more years of it out of the league. I said, but everybody was so focused on steroids, nobody was seeing the obvious. So I said, I'm 11 months sober now. I said, I go to AA, I go to 12-step meetings. I said, and I want you guys to hear it from me. I don't want you to hear it 6 months from now. I said, you're getting damaged goods. I said, yeah, I was the second player taken in the draft in 1989. And now it's 1996, only 6-7 years later. But I said, you're getting damaged goods. But I said, I'll give you everything I got every day. And they were like shocked. They weren't shocked at the fact that I had the problem. They were shocked at the fact that I told it to them.
Yeah.
Because apparently it wasn't a normal thing to do. And
yeah. And this is a different time, dude. This is what, 1995 or 96? Like
96.
Yeah, people aren't. It's not as I hate to say this, and it's, forgive me for this term, but it wasn't as in vogue to be sober then. I mean,
it's cool now.
Yeah,
it's cool as shit now. It's like you want to be California sober.
Yeah, right.
Smoke a little bit of weed here and there, you're good. And it works for some people. It doesn't work. My experience has been it's good for some people because their life is a train wreck, stone cold sober, and it's not. It's a mental illness, like above and beyond alcoholism. Like there's some other chemical things going on where a prescription of, say, marijuana or whatever, antidepressant or whatever, seems to make that person normal. And it does. Now, those cases I've seen very few of. I've seen a lot of the, hey, well, that one person did it, so I'm going to try it. I've seen hundreds of those cases, and then epic fails. Yeah. Right? So I'm like, okay, you guys try it, and I'll just sit back and watch. You guys will be my case study.
Yeah, because I remember those 100 people who did it, and it didn't work for them. Post
and
that.
I'm like, and I don't want to go back there.
Well, a couple more things. Was there a moment in the NFL on the field when you were like, holy shit, I can't believe this?
Oh my God. I was, the day we opened up my first year there, because, they sign you, doesn't mean you make the team. You still have to go through camp and make the 53-man roster, and I did. And I'm not starting at this point. I didn't start till halfway through my first season back. But I'm on special teams and doing all that other stuff. So we were in the RCA Dome, so it's covered. We're playing the Cardinals. They come up to Indy, and it's opening day in the NFL, which might be the third greatest day in the world next to Easter and Christmas. It's like that feeling is undescribable when you have, even though we had a dome, it was semi-transparent, you could see through it. We had F-16s flying over the national anthem, and it's like you just can't imagine I have goosebumps now talking about it. And at that time, I was in that week. It was opening day in the NFL, but it was close to that week where I was 18 months sober. And during the national anthem, I'm sitting there, and it's kind of like, this is surreal, because 18 months prior to that, I couldn't get off the couch because I was too sloth-like, and I was consumed in my addiction. And here I was back in the NFL. If somebody would have told me that, I would have said, you're crazy. To me, that was a longer shot than going from Canada to the U.S. and getting drafted second. Yeah. And it happened. And it's like, deep down inside, I knew it could happen because I thought getting sober was impossible. I tried so many different ways, and I tried so many times, I'm talking hundreds of times, couldn't do it. And then when I got introduced to 12-step, put myself into treatment, and it stuck. And that happened. And when that happened, I knew anything was possible. And so a lot of things, you have to have luck, and a lot of things have to fall in place. And that happened. And I thought to myself, and you're sitting there, 50, 60,000 people, and back in the NFL, I'm in a uniform. Somebody actually gave me a job because 18 months ago, I couldn't have worked at a gas station or I couldn't have dug ditches. I couldn't have done anything. Not that there's anything wrong with those jobs, but I wasn't even competent enough to show up for those jobs.
Dude, I lived in a halfway house and I worked at a KFC. Now, I was sober, but I mean, I was, you talk about a day at a time. I was figuring it out. You know, I was starting over.
Well, damn, look how many chicken nuggets you got for free. Right?
Yeah, that was the perspective. But, you know, when I got sober, people weren't banging down my door offering me, it was huge opportunities.
So whether, and you know what, the feeling that you had by being re-employable and re-employed by, say, KFC, and I'm re-employed by the NFL, is the same feeling. It's just a different job because we both thought we were pieces of shit. We weren't worth it. We're losers. We're, a disgrace to our families. And of course, here I am talking for you, but I'm telling you.
No, you're exactly right, dude.
And I'm like, and all of a sudden, like, somebody's actually offering me a job.
And I took it seriously. Like, I remember a fucking guy showed up like an hour late one time. I looked at him, Zach. I was like, how dare you? You know?
Right. How dare you be irresponsible? I would never do something like that.
Because I was a new guy, and I took it seriously. I was, and that's a good reminder for me to take my opportunities today seriously.
Absolutely.
All right.
It's only, I remember the words in my head were, as those F-16s flew over, I just thought to myself, only by the grace of God am I here today. And then that said, along with, getting sober and, that act of providence that happened for me and that happens for so many of us.
What do you say to the person that's in the meeting that's just trying to get one day that asks you, what do I do?
What do you got to lose? I mean, what do you really have to, like, why are you here if life's going so good? You're probably not on a winning streak. And to change your circumstances, you have to change your action. And just give it a chance. Like, just give it like a legitimate 30 days. And I know that, as you know, putting together 3 days sometimes felt impossible. But you can do it. And you're not special and unique that you have problems that other people don't have. All you have to do is trust in the process and become part of that community of a group, or don't think you're so unique and special that nobody can relate to you. Because trust me, hundreds and thousands can relate to your problems because they have the same problems. Some of them have even worse problems. So, that there used to be a phrase, I don't know if it's still used, but when I was first going to meetings, that there's some people that are just terminally hip and fatally cool to make it because they don't want to be around the cheesy crowd that's the one day at a time crowd. And I'm like, you know what? I'll stick with the cheesy. If that's what you call cheesy, I'm in on the cheesy crowd because life's a lot better for me now. And they got nothing. You got nothing to lose. Absolutely nothing to lose and everything to gain. And you still have the choice at the end of those 30 days to say, you know what, my life is worse, so I'm going to go back to drinking because my life's better.
It's 30 days for the rest of your life. And a guy that I know in meetings says, we'll refund you your misery.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the exact, because when you're kicking ass in life, do you ever feel compelled if you've never been to an AA meeting just to show up at an AA meeting?
Everybody kind of crawls in there, dude. And the one thing we haven't mentioned is by opening up and by giving that real shot at that 30 days, man, Tony, there's people who have come around to meetings that actually did give it a shot for 30 days and bared their heart and soul. And maybe they went back out and died for whatever reason. Well, I know why, because we're addicts and that's what we do. But they helped me.
Absolutely.
And that stays with me.
Absolutely. And then you get that person that's in and out, like hundreds of times. And you think to yourself, that person is never going to make it. You see them get 25, 30-day chips over 10 years. And you're like, they're never going to make it. And then all of a sudden you don't see them for years and they're like 4 years sober. And you're like, oh my God. It's like you just never know. When a person's ready, they're ready. And like I said, you don't go to AA because you're kicking ass. You know, when you first come to AA, you go to AA because you're getting your ass kicked. If you're drinking chemically and doing stuff like that, and it's a very and I do say AA and I do say 12-step, and but it's a very sacred thing for me, and I hold it really dear to my heart.
Dude, I can't thank you for taking the time to spend time with us. I mean, you're an amazing photographer. You do public speaking. Clearly, you spoke to me today and publicly, ultimately, and I think we're going to help, or you're going to help some people. And the book, and just with this podcast, the book is My Dirty Little Secrets, right? You can get it on Amazon.
Yep, you get it on Amazon.
What else can they find you? What else you got going on? Anything I could share?
My website is my name, so it's just TonyMandarich.com, and it's got it's mostly right now got my photography on it, but I'm actually just gonna make it a central hub. It's gonna have my photography. I'm dabbling into the podcasting stuff, and got some other projects going on. My public speaking information will eventually be there, but I just want it to be one source, one place, one-stop shop. But most of my concentration is the public speaking, the photography, and just being of service. And
you're Tony Mandarich, so people can find you. I mean, and I just like I did. I sent you a direct message, and you're of service, and you got right back to me. And
about the only social media I really go on is Instagram. And even though I have a Facebook account, everything from Instagram syndicates the other social media that I have. But the only place I log in on is Instagram, and it's because you couldn't build a better platform for photographers.
No, it's awesome. And
right?
your photography is unbelievable. And I think a lot of people will be shocked. I think people were shocked when they saw you back in the NFL. And I think they'll be shocked by some of your eye, and it's unbelievable work. And dude, I cannot thank you enough. For me, somebody who, you've been in my life for 3 decades, and to be able to have this moment with you and share with you in sobriety is just unbelievable. I remember when you came back with the Colts, and I was still, I was in the middle of it. I didn't even know I had a problem, but I loved the feeling of you getting back on top, and just sharing with you, and also relating that it's an everyday struggle regardless of where you are. But you got to do the work.
Yeah, you got to do the work, and it's and just our whole discussion today is really how you and I dialogued, whether we were doing a podcast or where we were sitting having coffee.
Yeah,
it's just that's how the program works, and it's just phenomenal. I mean, I'm almost 27 years on borrowed time, and I take every day extremely seriously, and I'm very lucky to be sober.
Tony, man, thank you so much. This is going to be up on Thursday. I'll send you a link to it, and I'll be in touch, man. I can't thank you enough.
Awesome. I really appreciate it, and I'll make sure I share it and everything.
All right, take care, Tony.
All right, my friend. Have a good day.
You too, buddy.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening to The Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Souza. And of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at roguemedianetwork.com. And of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
This has been a Rogue Media podcast.